Hello everyone, my name is Dee and welcome to Books and Quirks. Today I want to tell you about the books that I read this past week, October 15th through the 21st. And yeah, let me just get started. I was able to finish 3 books this past week and I absolutely loved all 3 of them. So I'm so happy. And the first one that I want to talk about is Evergreen Falls by Kimberley Freeman. This is a historical fiction. It takes place partly in the present and partly in the 1920s. So it was right up my alley. I absolutely love historical fiction. It's just another genre that I cannot get enough of. So part of the story takes place in the present, in 2014, and it follows a character named Lauren. Lauren had a very sheltered upbringing. She was very closed off from the world. She never had a relationship. She never really had any friends because her mother really kept her sheltered, and she was forced to spend all of her adolescence and all of her early adulthood taking care of her brother. So she's now finally moved away for the first time on her own in this town in Australia. It takes place in Australia, by the way. And she is intrigued by this old hotel called the Evergreen Falls Hotel, which has really been closed off for decades. And it's a hotel that is sort of frozen in time. It really hasn't been functional since, I believe, the 1920s. So it's really intriguing to her, and she finds a way to get inside. It also goes back in time, and a lot of the story takes place in the 1920s, where you're able to follow a few characters. Flora is one of the main characters. She's an aristocrat, and her brother Sam, as well as Violet. Violet is one of the staff workers at the hotel, and it follows their storyline. So Flora is able to find a way into this hotel and stumbles upon some love letters. So the whole story is kind of unraveling the mystery of these love letters, who wrote them, what was their story, and also going back into the 1920s and reading about it sort of in real time. So I absolutely love this book. It's a standalone. It's not, a series or anything. I loved it so much. And I was disappointed when it ended because I wanted more. It was just so wonderful. So the good things about this book was, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was wonderful. The historical accuracy of the 1920s, I think, was really spot on. I studied a lot of history. I'm a huge history buff, so I'm really always reading about, my favorite time periods. The 1920s is one of my favorite time periods. I love it so much. That whole, flapper era. And the fact that it took place in Australia was also really interesting. I had never read a book that took place on that continent, so that was also very interesting as well. Also, this story does deal with drug addiction, so I thought that was represented really well. One of the characters deals with that, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought that representation was really done well also. So I really enjoyed both storylines. I thought Lauren's storyline, because she's also dealing with her own drama of, dealing with her past, dealing with, you learn in the first couple of pages that, she's living on her own and she no longer has to live by her mother's rules because her brother has passed. So it's dealing with, that sort of, coming to terms with that and finding more about what her brother was like before he got sick, because she was still rather young when it all started. And also the storyline of the 1920s. I found it particularly interesting, especially in present time, that the hotel was sort of frozen in time. It was sort of a time capsule, and I would love to have, investigated something like that. A building that was frozen in time like that, because I think it's just so magical and so wonderful. So that is my my thoughts on Evergreen Falls. So if you get a chance to pick it up, if you like historical fiction, if you like the 1920s, I think you would really enjoy this book. The next book that I finished this past week was The Witch's Kiss by Katherine and Elizabeth Corr. This is a part of a series. It's the first book in a series, but having said that, it does wrap up really well. It does leave room so I can see how, another book can be brought in. But if this was a standalone, I would have still been really happy. It doesn't leave a lot of open threads at the end of the story. So this book follows Meredith. Meredith. I don't know why I couldn't say that name. Meredith is descended from a long line of powerful witches. And Meredith's family is dealing with a sort of curse or sort of destiny that has been passed down through the generations. That eventually one of the descendants of these witches will have to battle an evil sorcerer. I don't know how else to explain it. So this book follows Meredith, her brother Leo, and Jack, Jack is a immortal prince, kind of, and he's also known as the King of Hearts. He goes around and steals people's hearts. It also follows Gwendian. Gwendian is the evil sorcerer. So basically, this story is about Meredith. Meredith is coming into her powers, and she finds out that she's part of this destiny, and an evil sorcerer is coming back to life, and it's sort of up to her alone to deal with this and to find the magic within herself to defeat this evil person. And I thought it was really wonderful and well done. I know that summary may sound a little bit cheesy, but I actually didn't think it was cheesy at all. I love the relationship between Meredith and her brother. I thought that was just so wonderful. He cared. He was an older brother. He cared so much for her. And there is a little bit of a love story involved as well, but it's not the main focus of the story at all. Jack is this prince, and she has to find a way to stop him from stealing hearts and to defeat the sorcerer that controls Jack as well. So I don't know how else to explain it without spoiling it, but it also follows two time periods just like the previous book. So it follows the present, and you see Meredith, and she's trying to figure out, where she comes from and what she's supposed to do. And it also goes back in time to the Anglo-Saxon era. It takes place in the UK, by the way. To the Anglo-Saxon era, where in 500 AD, where, this all started from. How it got to this point, how Gwendian, the evil sorcerer, came to be, how he took control of the prince, and how the witches sort of banded together and cast a spell so that all of the descendants would gain this power, this ability to eventually and hopefully defeat him. That's really all I can say about this book. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. I just thought it was just so much fun. And even though it wrapped up pretty well, I do plan on picking up the second book, which is called The Witch's Tears. And I think it comes out in February. And the last book that I finished just a couple of days ago was finally The Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly. I've had this book in the last couple videos. It just took me a while to get through, but I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely thought this was such a good historical fiction. Again, it's another historical fiction, but it has all of the creepiness that I think is appropriate for October. I loved it so much. It takes place in 19th century Victorian times, but New York City. So it's just right at my alley. Once again, this was such a good reading week. I loved everything about it. So this book follows Josephine Montfort. Montfort is an aristocrat, and she is trying to unravel the death of her father. Her father was murdered, and she's trying to find out what happened. Because of this, she meets a reporter named Eddie Gallagher. Eddie Gallagher is, just kind of, he lives in the lower class part of New York City, but because he's a reporter, he has a lot of different connections. So she gets caught up with him trying to find out any pieces of information she can about why her father was murdered, why anyone would want to hurt him. Because of this, she's brought into sort of the creepy, seedy parts of town, and there's a lot of seedy characters that come into play, and I just thought it was so wonderful, and it depicted, that time period in New York City so well. There was even references to, Oliver Twist and other things, which I absolutely loved in this book. Most of the book followed this murder mystery. What happened. There were, parts of the book took place in an insane asylum. Parts of the book took place in a morgue. Parts of the book were, dealt with, grave, digging up corpses in graves. It was really quite creepy, but also this book had some really lovely aspects to it as well. There is a love story that develops in this book as well, and I just thought it was just so heartwarming, and and I thought it was very mature as well. This is a YA novel, but I just thought it was just so wonderful. But the main aspect of the story, the main plot, is that murder mystery. What happened, who did it, why. So it's kind of a whodunit. So those are my thoughts on These Shallow Graves. I thought it was really well written. I enjoyed every single bit of it, and I highly recommend it, especially if you like sort of creepy stories, and if you want an October recommendation. That is all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a lovely day. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all very soon. Bye.